A girl left the gym and headed home, just a few hundred yards away. She never made it. A short errand turned into a mystery that seized an entire country, pulled in thousands of volunteers, and forced investigators to chase ghosts, rumors, and one impossible family secret. This is Fractured Files. Tonight, we dive into the case of Yara Gambirasio, a 13-year-old whose disappearance and murder would become one of the most notorious investigations in modern Italy. What began as a simple walk home would spiral into mistranslations, mass DNA screening, and a revelation buried in a family tree. Yara Gambirasio was born on May 21, 1997, in the town of Brembate di Sopra, a quiet community near Bergamo, not far from Milan. The town, with its cobbled streets, historic architecture, and a population of just over 7,000, was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other and parents didn't think twice about letting their children roam freely. Yara came from a close, loving family. Her father Fulvio and her mother Mora raised 4 children: Yara, her older sister, and 2 younger brothers. The Gambirasios had deep roots in the area, and their home was filled with warmth, laughter, and the everyday chaos of a busy household. Yara was known as bright, independent, and deeply dedicated to her passion: gymnastics. She trained regularly at the sports complex, just a few hundred yards from her home. It was more than a hobby. It was her world. Her coaches admired her discipline, and her friends adored her for her kindness and determination. Just a few hundred yards separated that sports complex from her front door. It matters because on November 26, 2010, that short distance became an abyss. On November 26, 2010, Yara had a simple errand to run. Around 5:15 p.m., she told her parents she needed to stop by the gym to return a stereo to her coach. It was just a few minutes away, a walk she had taken countless times before. She promised she'd be back within the hour. No one thought twice about it. The town was safe. The walk was short. But that night, when 7 p.m. came and went, and Yara still hadn't returned, her parents began to worry. At 7:11, her mother called her cell phone, straight to voicemail. That sinking feeling no parent ever wants to feel set in immediately. Within minutes, they reached out to police. The case was assigned to Letizia Ruggeri, an experienced prosecutor known for her persistence. She immediately mobilized local officers and called in the military police for backup. The first stop was the sports center. Yara's coach confirmed she had indeed come by around 5:30. Friends remembered chatting with her, seeing her do a few warm-up exercises, then watching her leave. The last digital trace was a text message sent at 6:44 p.m. to a friend. That was the final moment anyone heard from her. The timeline was tight. Between 6:44 and 7, something had happened. Police canvassed the streets, fields, and the small riverbank near town. Volunteers and firefighters joined the search, combing through the area inch by inch. Dogs picked up Yara's scent at the sports center, but instead of heading toward her home, the trail went the opposite direction, toward the neighboring town of Mapello. Even more chilling, cell tower data showed Yara's phone pinged in Mapello at 6:49 p.m. Barely 5 minutes after she texted her friend. There was no way she could have walked there in time. Someone had transported her. 2 theories emerged. A kidnapping was most likely. A runaway scenario always sits on the table in early hours, but it made no sense when you read her 6:44 p.m. text. She had plans the next day. She didn't write like someone about to disappear. Investigators interviewed family, friends, coaches, classmates, neighbors. Nothing looked off. No fights, no secret boyfriend, no sudden mood shifts. Letizia pressed for something more systematic. She ordered wiretaps on phones linked to the family and their wider circle. She pushed for cell phone location data on every device that had moved through Mapello that evening. If a kidnapper carried a phone, That phone had touched a tower. The answer came back like a tidal wave. Roughly 15,000 numbers had moved through that slice of network. Teams spread across desks and did the impossible. They listened, flagged, translated, transcribed. Days blurred. The town waited. Then a line rose up in the noise. A man's voice recorded days earlier due to processing delays. "Forgive me, Lord. I didn't kill her." The name tied to the number was Mohammed Fikri, a Moroccan construction worker who lived in the same town where the phone ping had placed Yara's device. Police located his car and seized it. In the trunk was a mattress with stains. At the same time, they learned Fikri had boarded a ship heading for Morocco. Everything about it looked bad. Authorities intercepted the ship. They brought Fikri back to Italy in handcuffs. Headlines blared that Yara's killer had been caught. Cameras followed as he was led past reporters. The lab tested the stains, not human blood. The supposed confession from the call unraveled too. In his native language, he hadn't said what the officer thought he said. The translation was wrong. Fikri was innocent. Public trust buckled. The investigation slid back to the starting line, except now everyone was watching with anger and confusion. For 3 months, search efforts continued without success. Then, on February 26, 2011, fate intervened. A man flying a remote-controlled plane in a field 6 miles from Brembate had to make an emergency landing in tall grass. While retrieving it, he noticed what looked like a pile of rags. But protruding from beneath were boots. It was a body. The remains were badly decomposed, but the clothing was the same Yara had worn on the night she vanished. Near the body lay her iPod, house keys, SIM card, and the battery from her phone. The phone itself was missing. Italy's top forensic expert confirmed the cause of death. Multiple stab wounds. Some clothing was missing. The condition of the body limited what could be learned, but one thing came back that changed everything. Foreign male DNA was present on her underwear. A trace. Finally, a trace. The lab also recovered fibers commonly used in specific fabrics. It suggested a line of work. Maybe a type of manufacture, maybe a vehicle interior. Investigators cataloged and compared. It sharpened possibilities, but did not point to one name. On the gloves and on the phone battery, there were additional partial foreign DNA traces, but they were too small to build a full profile, and nothing matched in existing databases. 2 months later, a new analysis of the underwear sample produced a full male profile. That result cracked the door open. Letizia split her resources into teams. One team gathered DNA from everyone who had a connection to the sports center. Another team mapped numbers that traveled the path from Brembate di Sopra to Mapello that evening, then requested samples. Another team kept combing the field area and the town for people who might have seen a car stop, a door open, a figure move. The collection effort became enormous. Thousands of swabs moved through labs across Italy. The pace felt glacial from the outside. On the inside, it felt like trying to find one voice in a stadium. No match. Weeks became months. Letizia tried something that sounded odd at first. Near the field where Yara's body was found, there was a nightclub. Off and on, the club drew a rough crowd. It also drew a lot of people from surrounding towns. Investigators stationed officers outside on weekend nights. They checked membership cards, asked for cooperation, and collected DNA. It was a long shot, but at that stage there were no short shots. The name attached to the swab was Damiano Guarinoni. The match wasn't full, and Damiano had an alibi so solid you couldn't touch it. He had been on another continent when Yara disappeared, but partial meant something else. The killer was related to Damiano. That single idea widened the case by centuries. Investigators moved into archives and church books and civil records. They drew a family tree with more names than a small-town phone book. The center of gravity kept pulling back to one man, Giuseppe Guarinoni, now deceased. If he was the father of the lineage that led to the unknown profile, you had to ask a hard question. Had he fathered a child outside of marriage? The team looked for connections. There were whispers and old stories, but nothing that felt like a map, until they learned that Giuseppe visited a spa complex every May in a small town near Milan. He always went alone and stayed for 2 weeks. He did this for years. Letizia requested visitor records. The surprise was that they still existed, and they were enough to build lists. Names of women who stayed during those same stretches. The work was slow and careful. Names became interviews. Interviews turned into more names. At one point, the media got wind of the secret child hypothesis and ran wild with it. Reporters hunted for extramarital children in villages that had nothing to do with the case. People whispered. Tip lines lit up with stories. Most of the tips led nowhere. Finally, a lead emerged. A woman named Esther Arzuffi, believed to have had an affair with Giuseppe decades earlier. When her DNA was compared, it revealed the truth. Esther was the mother of the killer. She had twins, a boy and a girl. The boy's name was Massimo Bossetti, a 42-year-old construction worker. He lived in Mapello, the same town that caught the ping from Yara's phone at 6:49 p.m. that night. Investigators needed his DNA without tipping him off. At a roadside checkpoint, Bossetti was asked to take a routine breathalyzer. Unaware of the true purpose, he complied. His saliva was enough. When the result came back, there was no wiggle room. The DNA matched the male profile from Yara's underwear. It was a perfect fit. On June 16, 2014, about 4 years after Yara vanished, police arrested Massimo Bossetti. From the day of his arrest, Bossetti claimed he was innocent. He said the DNA was wrong, contaminated, planted. His wife said he was home that evening with the family. But evidence piled up. 1. Surveillance footage placed his car near the gym. 2. Witnesses reported hearing a child's screams from a car resembling his. 3. Fibers from his vehicle matched fibers on Yara's clothing. And 4. His internet searches revealed disturbing interests. The defense attacked the core. They argued that the DNA could have been mishandled or contaminated in collection or in storage. They said an innocent explanation existed. Bossetti claimed frequent nosebleeds. His lawyer suggested that blood from a nosebleed could have transferred to tools or clothing, then, by some chain of contact, reached the victim's underwear without him ever meeting her. They raised the concept of 2 kinds of DNA, the part that changes between relatives and the part that changes very slowly across generations. They argued that what the lab labeled as a match could have fit multiple people inside a wider family network. Prosecution experts pushed back. They said the match was specific and conclusive. Then the defense dropped something that created more public doubt. A new suspect, or at least a shadow. A gym instructor named Sylvia. After Yara's body was recovered, a lab found Sylvia's blood on the sleeve of Yara's jacket. Sylvia's father told investigators she cried all night after the disappearance. Phone records showed later deleted messages between Sylvia and her brother that evening. No one could recover the content. In court, when asked to explain the blood, Sylvia said she didn't know. When asked why she had cried, she said she didn't remember. When asked about the messages, she said she didn't recall. It sounded suspicious and it made noise in the press, but the prosecution argued it did not intersect with the DNA on the underwear, the fibers, the timing, the route, the car near the gym. The judge allowed the jury to consider the Sylvia angle, but it could not displace the core evidence. The question at the center never changed. Whose DNA was on the underwear? The lab said it belonged to Bossetti. The trial began in the summer of 2015 and ran hot. Crowds lined up outside the courthouse. Television crews camped on sidewalks. Commentators turned every hearing into a nightly debate. People who had never heard the word Mapello could now point to it on a map. The jury listened. They asked for clarification on chain of custody. They reviewed exhibits. They watched the camera clips from the night outside the sports complex. In 2016, the verdict landed: life in prison for Massimo Bossetti. Gasps, then a low rumble moved through the courtroom. Outside, some people cried, some cheered, some shook their heads. Inside the Gambirasio family, there was no celebration, only a kind of quiet that follows a long storm. In the days after the verdict, some people remained troubled by Sylvia's unexplained blood on the jacket sleeve. They didn't like the blank spots, the silences in her testimony, the missing messages. Those questions never rose high enough to crack the conviction, but they stayed in the background like an unresolved chord. This investigation became one of the most expensive and far-reaching in Italian history. It showed what mass DNA screening can do and what it cannot do. It showed how old records, spa guest lists, and a careful family tree can become the backbone of a 21st century murder investigation. It showed how a roadside checkpoint can catch more than drunk drivers. It also showed how quickly rumors grow, how one detail, like blood on a sleeve, can grab an audience that is already frightened and angry. How a trial becomes a mirror. Everyone sees what they fear the most and what they hope for the most, often at the same time. Most of all, it reminded everyone that horror does not always wear a mask. Sometimes it looks like a person buying pizza on your street. This is Fractured Files. If this case moved you, if you want more deep dives into the mysteries that unsettle entire towns, subscribe to the channel, tap the bell, and share this video with someone who follows true crime. Your support helps bring more of these stories to light. Thanks for watching.